Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today, I'm going to be talking about dungeons in Valheim and why it's really important for things to be respawned. And I'm going to show kind of how that's handled in Enigma and also just in general talk about how it's handled in Valheim overall. Because looking back over the years of running the server and my experiences with other people's worlds, talking to other people, and just playing Valheim itself, there's a couple simple things that if you change make a really big difference in the gameplay experience itself. And one of those things, I think the most important ones, is this notion of regeneration. So regenerating rocks, respawning metal, resetting dungeons. This is what I'm going to be talking about and kind of teaching in today's live stream. While I do that, though, I'm going to be showing off the new World Serpent biome. Yeah, it's got its own biome. I'm actually on the World Serpent right now. And instead of being just some big blank path, now it's like a place that has unique assets depending on where it is, right? So right now, we are in the Mistlands, right? So if we keep going down, we'll see that there's these spirally things. I've actually messed them up. They're too close to each other right now. I'm trying to get it so you always see one spirally twisting thing, but I messed up the math, so now they're all like three next to each other. But as you can see, this is the World Serpent. And as you keep going, if you go into different biomes, different assets spawn. So we're in the Mistlands, so you see a bunch of Mistlands assets as if they've been, so to speak, torn out of the ground. And that way, from the player's perspective down here, it gives the World Serpent more of a vibe, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to see it right now. But here we can make it nighttime. It actually looks a lot cooler at nighttime from my perspective. You see all the silhouettes of everything. So from the player's perspective, it'll look like it like tore up a bunch of the world, and it so to speak rises out of the ocean when you reach the edge of the world. So it's as if it has torn itself out of the world. Make sense? And now this is the Ashlands one, and this is my favorite, to be honest. It varies from like intense chaos with loads and loads and loads of different stuff to more simple scenes where there's just a couple assets floating around. I'm just showing this off a little bit right now, but I won't actually be talking too much about the World Serpent today. I'm mostly going to be ranting about dungeons and why Valheim handles dungeons the way it does in vanilla and what the design philosophy is for that. I'll cover like the benefits of the way vanilla does it, because there are reasons that Iron Gate has the dungeons not respawn and doesn't respawn metal and all of these things. There's reasons for all of that, right? Hey, hello Gray, welcome. Hey, I'm glad you made it to a stream. That's awesome. But essentially, a lot of Enigma is kind of me changing the design philosophy of Valheim. So in order to do that effectively, I have to understand what the design philosophy is just in general normally, because if I don't understand why Iron Gate made things a certain way, then when I change them, there's consequences from changing it because I didn't realize it was important for something else. Make sense? So that's why it's really important. Even if I don't agree with it, I need to understand it. I need to know what the purpose was, what the point was, what their intention was. Make sense? So that's what I'll be talking about. But before I get to that, I'm going to move forward a little bit here. I'm just taking in these views here. I'm trying to think of why is the spiral? Why are they all next to each other? What is... Oh, is that just an illusion? No. No, they are very close to each other. Huh. I'll figure that out later. Let's see. So left says, can I build on the rocks, left and right? Yes, you can. So that's actually a good thing to show off. I'll just do that. I'll show you just one more mechanic here. And then I'll probably yeah, I'll go to another part of the World Serpent, and then I'll just walk along it while I talk about the dungeon situation. But before I get into that, I just wanted to give you guys a bit of a chance to know what I'll be talking about today. So, let me just get seated here. Alright, so this part that I'm about to show you, I'm still working on. But let's, for example, let's spawn a pickaxe. The idea is that the player gets up here, and it's like a building paradise. They can, like, build in relative peace. Only monsters, flying monsters in certain areas might threaten them, but it's pretty rare to find something up here because you're so far away. If that makes sense? So what I'm trying to figure out right now is how to provide kind of flavored building resources. Because if we look at the map right now... Oops. Okay, the World Serpent, it didn't mark itself because I actually accidentally built it during generation, which I didn't even know was possible. But that's a whole other thing. I won't get into that. But basically, the World Serpent goes all the way around the edge of the world, okay? Like the circumference of the world. So you can imagine like a huge path that goes through all of it, right? So, essentially, the thing I have to figure out is how to allow players to harvest resources in a really easy to replenish way. Make sense? So here we can see the normal World Serpent itself is too hard, right? But if we go up onto something like this, this is the problem I have to deal with, and this is one of the things I haven't fixed yet. But basically, because these things are floating, watch what happens. Okay, like, we triggered it, right? That's fine, nothing crazy. But usually, when you destroy one chunk... Yeah. You know, even in vanilla Valheim this happens. When you destroy a big rock and it's floating, you'll get a lag spike when it all flips over, right? But because of the way I scripted the converter that you're about to see, okay? So, like, basically it converts the drops that would normally be stone. You would normally just get Grouston. But we got Grouston, Ashwood, coins, scrap iron. You see, so we're basically getting a mix of building materials just by destroying that one floating rock. And then the rock itself is going to respawn unless we build something within 22 meters of its location, right? But as you can see, like, look at this, look at this. 1 second. Okay. At first, this was an accident. Because I was like, there's so many building resources here. But as I was thinking about it more, I was like, you know, maybe that's better. Because the whole point of this area is to encourage building. The idea is that, like, Valheim sort of lacks an endgame experience, and it doesn't encourage people to build too much, right? So, by having a situation where, like, you can easily get loads and loads of building materials, and there's not a bunch of combat, and it's really low instances, right? Like, right now, there's 700 something instances, but most of that is... Like, 200 of that is all this stuff right here. And welcome, More Gaming. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And hello, Fish. Glad to see you again. Glad to see you. So, like, here, for example, this is a lot of material, right? Like, we just destroyed one single floating rock, and we got all this stuff, and it was really laggy. So, like, I have a feeling no matter what I do, it's going to be laggy. So it's kind of better if I sort of overproduce stuff. Does that make sense? Like if I like because they're gonna make a laggy experience once, and as long as they get enough stuff from it once, probably it's okay. Um, I'm not really sure though, to be honest. So Gray's asking, to stop the respawn, am I just using banned objects? Oh, that is a whole thing that we will actually get into because it's part of what I'll be talking about today with respawning assets and stuff, right? But just right now, before I forget, and while I still have this train of thought here, I'm just gonna go into the scripts here, and I'm going to I see. Sorry, I was distracted by something else here. These numbers all need to be doubled, maybe? Yeah, that doesn't really make sense, but I'll see this next iteration. Okay. So I need to go into the, what is this called again? I think it's the vegetation skulls thing here, right? Because the skull spawns the thing, and then, yeah, here we go. Okay, so we're looking for the outcome in the Ashlands. Ashlands outcome. Okay. So basically, it looks like the weight here is too high. And then it's basically happening per thing, right? Which is quite messy here. But this is something I should balance more in detail later. So for now, I'm just going to note. I think here. Oh no, not this one. Notepad. Here we go. Yeah, I'm just going to note that balance the item drop rate for building materials on World Serpent Mining Rock Destruction. Cool. That should be clear enough. All right. So that was what I was explaining to answer Left's question. Like basically you can mine these things, but I want to make it so players can build there as well. But I'm not really sure about the best way to do that because the players can already make these stability skull things. So like basically if the player, let's say, if they find a spot that they really like, for example, let's say that they want to get over there and start building something. Basically, obviously, they'd have to make a workbench and do the actual stuff here. But anything you build off of the World Serpent has structure because it's like a rock, right? So, essentially... Whoa! I'm not going to make it. I didn't make it. I knew that as soon as I jumped, I was like, oh shit. But you can imagine how the player would go up here. They'd, like, let's say they wanted to build in this little alcove right here. Like, if I have it set up the way it is right now, one pickaxe swing, right? Like, one messed up pickaxe swing is going to make it so they're now just a couple hits away from the whole thing popping, right? Like what we just saw earlier. And they'll have a lag spike, and then everything goes all crazy. You know what I mean? So that is not ideal, right? Like, there's ways I can work around that, right? But probably I'll make some way for players to, like, declare invincible. Okay? So, add ability for players to make a floating rock on World Serpent invincible. So that way, then you can, like, claim a rock, and you won't have to worry about it because it'll be the same as the World Serpent here. See, like, it just says too hard. You can't easily mess with it, right? So that's probably what I'll do. But for now, I'll just travel down the World Serpent. We can get a feel of the RNG and how it looks. And then I'll start talking about dungeons. And I'll also address the vegetation thing you're talking about, Gray, with the banned objects thing. Because basically, yes. The answer is yes, but it's complicated. It's not as simple as it seems because of how many things you have to keep in mind when you manage vegetation. But I'll cover all of that today. So before I get to that, let's talk about one more thing that happens on the World Serpent. I don't know why. Ignore the naked diverger, but there's something causing them to... Oh! I forgot I had a... I screwed myself. I forgot that the coin traders have, like, hack protection. So if you try and, like, mess with them, and you have God mode on, or you're flying, or you're in Ghost, then they don't like that. But actually, because I changed this logic here, probably now what I should do is just restart. Let's see what this is. This is just something from some old mod I'm running. Okay, cool. So now, while it's regenerating a new world, and that'll give me a chance to talk to you guys about the dungeon situation, okay? Let's first just talk about normal Valheim, okay? So when you play vanilla Valheim, how are dungeons handled and why are they handled that way? So the first thing to understand is that Iron Gate has a very specific design philosophy when it comes to Valheim itself. Their philosophy is one of consuming as an incentive to explore, okay? So basically, Iron Gate makes the player explore by consuming what they use. Does that make sense? You end up with a situation where the player finds a spot, they build things, they run out of copper, they run out of silver, they run out of iron, they do all the crypts. It's now consumed. That area is effectively dead, which means that the player must go elsewhere. Okay? Now, from my perspective, and I'll try not to be too critical, this is very ineffective, but I only know that it's ineffective because they did it, and I've experienced it a lot, and I've seen what happens. And basically, what you should actually do in game design in general, you should really refrain from artificially forcing players to do a certain thing. So in this case, let's say we're increasing the rate that players explore. Players are going to want to explore if they perceive there is unknown outside. Okay, that's it. That's all that they need. They need to think that there is unknown. There is something they don't know. There is something out there they have not discovered. This is what actually drives players to explore. It's more effective. When you motivate players to explore by taking away from what they have... Oh, that looks bad. I don't know what I did there, but that's not supposed to happen. So give me a moment here. It's probably because I ran this like 15 times and I haven't closed the Valheim client once. So that's probably what's going on. Give me a moment here. But basically, in normal Valheim, that's how they motivate you to explore. And in the design philosophy that the game was originally made in, and how it's maintained, the players are forced to explore because the world around them dies. The crypts no longer have any monsters in them. They no longer have any Surtling cores. You don't need Surtling cores because you only needed them for this one thing, and maybe you have some portals already, so you're good. So in general, Valheim itself relies heavily on the player getting something once and no longer needing it. There's a lot of linear elements in the game design philosophy, like literally, quite literally baked into the game. You want to see how long I've been doing this? This is just like the past week. But with discovery, like an exploration, you don't need to force the players to do it, and it's actually quite counterproductive to demolish the area they're playing in. Basically, you want the opposite. You want it so the area they're playing in becomes beautiful as they're playing. Does that make sense? Like it becomes more their own, more interesting, not the opposite where it gets destroyed. I will say it's an interesting commentary about consumerism and destroying the world and resource allocation in our world. But this is a video game. We don't need to have deforestation. We don't need to have all of these issues that we have in our real world because they get in the way of the fun of the video game. Make sense? Yeah, exactly, Gray. You get it. Discovery itself is the stronger drive. Exactly. But essentially, let me make sure this is set up right here. I could be wrong, by the way, and I'll see a sea of red as we're generating, but I'll eat that lesson if that happens. For now, I'm just going to keep talking as if it's fine. So you have this philosophy overall, right? The dungeons don't respawn. The trees don't regrow. The metals don't come back, all right? And now, there's a lot of consequences because of these realities of Valheim. You could debate about how necessary dungeons respawning, metal respawning, and all that is. I will say, from my perspective, it's one of the driving reasons that players in the game, get burned out and leave when they do. From my perspective, Valheim is a wonderful procedurally generated game that makes a lot of the same mistakes that games like Diablo made. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Diablo 1 and 2. Okay, I don't give a shit about any of the other games, but I really like Diablo 1 and 2. They did procedural generation at a time where it was not really used that much. They weren't the first to do it, I mean, there's games like Daggerfall and other procedurally generated games going back a long time. But Diablo was one of the first kind of like mainstream PC games to use procedural generation. Not the first, but one of them. But they still made a mistake. And basically, when you use procedural generation, you can't just do the same things you would do in a linear game. Because by doing that, you ruin the benefit of procedural generation. And Valheim is very much a game that suffers from this reality. If you think about it, your Valheim world itself is huge. It's enormous. It's got more in it than you'll actually explore most of the time. The problem, though, is no matter what seed you pick, you start in the center in a meadow. You go find stuff so that you can kill Ether. You make your thing. You have a series of linear steps that are exactly the same in every single vanilla Valheim playthrough. No matter what seed you play on, it's gonna start with the same, very similar first 2 or 3 sessions. They're almost all gonna be the same. So in this way, the world generation is being used ineffectively. Make sense? Because you have a world that is very unique, that is different every time, that is fascinating, an incredible world generation, great biomes, really cool, interesting things that happen elsewhere in the world. But then the way that you set the players up in it causes them to have a linear experience as if they're always playing on a very similar looking map. And this is the exact same issue that Diablo 2 in particular encountered. Not so much Diablo 1, but more so Diablo 2. And what I'm going to get at is, in Diablo 2, if you haven't ever played Diablo 2, let me give you some context here. So, basically, Diablo 2 had maps, and every map was different. So like you would make a new world, you'd go to the same, the same area, right? Like let's look at this here. Let's see if we can open up this screenshot a bit better. Okay. Yeah, this is perfect. So basically, you can see that they have their overmap, right? They're near the rogue encampment, which is the beginning, and then you have this stuff out here. So there's two layers right now, right? There's the overworld. You can see the pond, the character, the other stuff, right? That's the actual overworld. Then you have the map. And then the map shows this generated area. So the mistake that Diablo made, or Blizzard made, is that they used procedural generation to create these different areas every time you play. But then because of the way the game plays and how players play them, it doesn't matter. You don't actually have I'm in a different blood more or blood whatever it is. It's just another procedurally generated thing, and your brain doesn't feel that it's unique or different. You don't feel like you're having a different experience. Does that make sense? And it's the exact same thing that happens with Valheim, and it's a really easy mistake to make with procedural world generation, because you, as like a developer, you get so into the possibilities of the world generation that you then get kind of disconnected from how the player actually experiences that world, and they often experience things in like a loop or in a less productive way where they don't know what's possible. And players will, once they think, oh, I already know what this is, then they lose interest. So that's what I was trying to explain earlier, that it's really important that the player perceives that there is unknown out there. That alone is enough in most cases to get them exploring. Make sense? That is really gonna do it most of the time. So this gets us to, how do you fix this? And that is basically only possible with EWP, and a combination of EWP and loads of other stuff. But essentially, I'll show you some like basic methods that you can use, okay? Let's start with something simple, right? Let's get a, I don't know, I need an axe, right? Okay. Bum, 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 bum. All right. So in Valheim, you have dungeons, you have trees, you have rocks, you have metal, you have monsters, loads of stuff. I'm not going to try and explain everything because it'll be too much, right? So I'm under the path. It removed my tree. That bastard. I was going to cut that tree. But basically, let's see what happens here. Okay, we cut the tree. Nothing happened. Nothing triggered. Let's go out here a little bit. I think it's because I'm too close to the path. I don't actually remember. Maybe I can't see. Ah, there we go. Yeah, okay, so it is working. It's just taking some time. So basically, when you have normal Valheim, players will cut trees down, and they'll have to in order to get wood. So you end up with a very visually destroyed area. And that has a lot of consequences, both for the player who does it and then for all future players. So personally, I believe the game's just better if you remove that whole part of the game design loop. So none of that even happens. So to do that, you need to make it so everything comes back. Okay? So let's find a smaller asset real quick. And let me see. Regrowth. How should I do this? Here we go. Okay, I should make the timer change in this file so that it's easier for you all to visualize. That'll probably help. So basically, this is a regrowth system. It makes it so when a plant is destroyed, it rolls a chance to move itself somewhere else and show up later. Okay? So in this case, let's look for beach 1, which I think this is beach 1. Yeah, beach 1. So here we have beach 1 gets destroyed. It makes 2 saplings somewhere else. Whereas here, also saplings. Whereas here it makes the small ones. So we have different stuff going on, and there's a bunch of stuff on the screen, so I'm not trying to mess this up too much. But what I'm going to do is just make it so everything happens much faster. So all of the 599s, we're going to just turn them into 9s. And then all of the 600s, we're going to turn these into 10s. All right. Now I'm going to save this file, but then I'm going to undo these. I'll save that later. Let's see. We reloaded. We're good. Okay. So now if I chop down a beech tree, 10 seconds later, well, okay, it depends on the chance, basically. So I chopped it down. So it just triggered regrowth, probably. I think I can't see the message because the asset is too big. But we'll have to see. Yeah, it's hard to know where it's going to respawn the next thing. So you can see how it removes the stump. That's pretty simple, right? And basically, I didn't set it up right, but it rolled a chance, and then it either failed or it spawned behind me or in another direction. So somewhere there's now a sapling. Most likely there's 2 saplings. So if we look at this, let's go objects, list, beach, sapling. There's nothing nearby. So let's keep destroying stuff, and you'll kind of get a sense of... There we go. Okay. I see. So I just didn't get the RNG for it, but now it's happening, right? You see we get the regrowth triggered message, right? And then we have some little actions here. And what goes on? Well, it planted another tree. So now, of course, if we were to skip time, right, and we skip, like, I don't know, a lot of time, then boom, we have trees, okay? So that's the basic idea behind the trees, but that doesn't work for the metals, the rocks, and the dungeons. They all need kind of a separate system. Now, some people prefer a respawning system where the respawn happens in the exact same position that the vegetation originally grew in. I personally don't like that. I like it when the nature moves around. I find that to be more immersive because you'll have like a black forest, and then it, as you cut it, it creeps into the meadows nearby, and it just makes a whole bunch of interesting situations. So that's why I personally always use these moving around regrowth systems for the nature. For the rocks, it's different. I mean, like, I don't think the rocks need to move around, but for the nature, the trees, the plants, they basically have a 50% chance of making 2 babies or 2 other trees, depending on the tree that makes it. And that seems to work really well. It spreads the trees out real nice, picks different directions, and it simulates what happens in the real world where trees spread themselves through seeds, right? And this helps counter the player action. So even though players are harvesting stuff, they still end up getting to keep a lot of the beautiful nature. You just end up with logs around. Makes sense? But so now that we've done that, let's move on to the rocks. The rock respawning system is separate because it's more complicated than the trees respawning. The trees basically You have to have a way to prevent the tree that grows from being in a base and causing problems, but they don't really cause too many problems. Trees aren't so bad even if they grow in someone's base. So there's still catches for that. And so that's why, like, I'm going to give you an overview, but I'm not going to go into the script for this because, to be honest, it's quite complicated. Like, you would think it's really easy. Like, rock gets hurt, replace it. Tree gets hurt, replace it. But there's so many different scenarios that come up where you want that or you don't want it, or the player, like, doesn't want it to respawn, or they want part of it to not respawn. It's really messy. But for now, let's move on to the rocks. And basically the way it works is there's the plants, then there's rocks and metal, and then there's the dungeons. Okay? That's going to be what we're covering. So we covered the plants, and now we can move on to the rocks. The rocks are very similar. You hit the rock, and then as soon as you've hit it, now it started a timer. As you just saw there, it said 5 minutes. Okay? So basically what's going to happen now is in 5 minutes, a special cloud of smoke, basically, is going to show up here. And then that cloud of smoke is going to remember what the rock is. And then if, when the cloud of smoke shows up, there's nothing built nearby, then the rock is going to respawn. But let's say that the player built something nearby. Like, let's say they built a workbench, okay? Very simple. Boom. They built a workbench. Now, because this workbench is within 22 meters, when the thing happens to this rock, it's gonna just delete itself because it checks, and before it performs its action, it checks, okay? And so that's the like main mechanic that makes these kind of systems more complicated than you would expect, because you can't just replace the thing automatically. It's not as simple as like, oh, player wants it to respawn. Okay. But what if the player's building there and they're trying to clear the area so that they can, you know, make their dream house or something? Well, then obviously rocks coming back is a big problem, right? And then separate issues, some rocks actually change the terrain. Makes sense? So you might think, oh, I don't need the checker. I can just have it. So, okay, when you go up to the rock, you know, you hit it, and then it triggers the respawn, and then in 5 minutes the rock comes back. It's easy, right? Well, not so easy, is it? Because if we actually start mining the rock, okay, now there's all these pieces. What happens to these pieces when the checker comes back? Well, it has to delete all of them. But if it deletes them, how does it know which is from this rock and which is just from another rock nearby? How do you make a separation, right? So this is why you have to do a lot of, like, consideration of the different ways that players end up doing things, right? And I will say that is such a lovely little break. Normally they don't break so cleanly, but I like that chunk there. And so that's why there's all these catches. You have to, like, put a placeholder that checks to see what currently happened, right? Because if I were to just respawn the rock, well, I could build here and do all this stuff, but then the rock comes back, and then boom, it spawns on top of everything. And if it's one of those nasty rocks, then it changes the terrain as well. So even if you then remove the rock because it spawned near a piece, now the terrain is reset, which is a whole other headache that you have to deal with. So it gets very, very frustrating. And that's why probably I'll just make a video at some point and show the file and then just have people download it. It's not something I can really, like, teach people how to script themselves, because it relies on a couple things that you need to be, like, comfortable with scripting to wrap your head around. And that concept, I don't know what to call it, but you use a placeholder. So instead of, like, spawning something directly, you spawn a pre-spawner. Make sense? So another time this comes up a lot in EWP scripting is with monsters. So let's say I want to spawn a skeleton. Okay, let's say I spawn the skeleton 10 meters in front of the player. that's fine until the moment there's an object, right? So now if I spawn something 10 meters in front of the player, like, the monster's going to be inside this thing. See what I'm saying? That doesn't really work. So that's why instead of spawning directly, you spawn a pre-spawner. So you spawn a thing that is like, I'm going to be a skeleton. But before I'm a skeleton, I'm going to check and see if anything's here. Is there space for me to exist? Okay, there is space. Make a skeleton. No space, nothing happens. That's the kind of stuff that, like, is more advanced, but makes your scripts feel more professional, like they're actually part of the game. Because, like, the difference between scripts that feel really, like, cheesy, like they feel like they're very much a modder just casually doing something, compared to a script that feels like this could straight up just be part of the game. You can't tell the difference. The difference is, did you consider all the outcomes? Because that's where it shows. Like, more casual scripts, or let's call them hobby scripting, it relies on knowing exactly how to do it and only doing it that way. The moment the player, you know, comes from the back door or blows the front of the house up to get in, like, you're in a different situation you didn't account for, right? So to make them really feel powerful, you have to account for, like, every possible situation that the player is going to encounter the situation in. And that can be hard for people because you have to imagine all the different ways that people play and the things they do. So that kind of stuff tends not to happen. Make sense? But now we have the metals. You've seen that. Okay, so like if I go up to this thing and I hit it, right? Basically, we just triggered a respawn. The message was down there, though, because it's so big. So in 5 minutes, it'll delete itself and just come back. Okay? The same thing happens with copper, and the same thing happens with silver. The silver is a little different because you also want to fill the pit, the terrain that it was in, right? Hey, Crumbs, welcome, welcome. I'm glad you showed up because today I'm working on those scripts for that game. I meant to do it last night, and I ended up getting really into the World Serpent, and I got a bunch of scripting work done, so it works out. But I'll have those scripts ready soon. They're really simple, so I don't think it'll be that bad. I'm glad that you reminded me, because today's Wednesday. I actually thought it was Tuesday. So you guys are going to be playing tomorrow. Do you need any more players, by the way? So I don't know if any of you guys know, but Crumbs does this like battleship game, basically. And let's see, I think there's a thing here. Yeah, yeah. So basically, if you want to play, maybe there's a screenshot with some visuals. Here we go. Yeah, this works. So basically, it's a version of Battleship, but in Valheim. I don't know if they are looking for any more, but I know I was going to play and I'm not, so that's at least one person they might be looking for. But basically, there's 2 teams of people, and then it's like Battleship, except the Viking is the battleship, and then you throw, like, bombs at each other, and all sorts of stuff. It's really cool, and we're going to do some cool stuff. It'll be fun. But it looks like they're full, so next time, maybe, if you're interested in playing. But anyway, let me get back on topic here. So we've covered the plants and how they respawn. We've covered the rocks, but we haven't got into the metal, right? Because rocks are basically metal. Or, sorry, metal or rocks, but they have something special about them. The rocks are mostly visual on top of the ground. The most obvious place having rock respawning helps with the looks is in the mountains, because the mountains tend to get really jagged and messed up by all of the like ranged combat or explosions or whatever it is you're doing. Especially if you fight a boss, it'll screw up all the rocks in the mountain. So by adding a rock respawner, you keep the visual aesthetics of the mountain intact even when players are playing there. However, when they are doing metal or getting copper or silver, for example, then you have to deal with the hole that they dug in order to get the copper or get the silver, right? So that's a whole other layer of complexity. That's something you do with a command to reset the terrain in that area. Make sense? And this is another reason that EWP is so important. Because if you just use upgrade world, basically you have to, that works at a small scale. But if you want things happening like quickly as players do them, one-on-one on a case-by-case basis, you have to use expand world prefabs. You can't use upgrade world. It's not it's just not an efficient use compared to expand world prefabs. EWP can fix anything because you can do whatever you want. So let's say you want to reset this terrain, you can just do that. It's easy. You don't have to like make it happen to all the copper across the world. You can just make a copper node spawn something that resets the terrain, and you adjust it to be specific to what it needs to be for the copper. And then you do the same thing with the silver. So that's what Enigma Mode does. However, it doesn't reset the terrain where copper is. And the reason I did that is just because I found that it adds to the vibe of copper mines more if they are these pits with this giant node in them. And players have to spend a lot of time digging a pit. So it's more rewarding from my perspective for the player when the copper nodes just actually respawn in the same place and they don't have the terrain reset. I know that like most server managers don't like the idea of that, but I find it to be more fitting, if that makes sense, because then you have these pits that become this kind of like, normally they're just a hazard. They're just this big copper mine that was all dug out, and then there's just nothing in it, right? But by respawning it, you put the copper back in, and you make it easier for the player to get copper because they already dug it out, so they can pop it more easily and everything, right? I find it to be a more enjoyable experience for the player. But as for the silver, you don't want the silver to be in that situation. Because the silver is gated by the fact that it is covered. So if you have people playing on your server and then all the silver nodes have been dug and respawned without the terrain being reset, then any player can just easily go into the mountain and find the silver immediately, and they can get it way easier. So I personally recommend that for the silver you reset the terrain, but for the copper you don't. That's just from my perspective. Ultimately you can do whatever you want. And this is all stuff that like already exists in Enigma Mode, and I'm gonna launch Enigma Mode 2 pretty soon, so it'll probably be out in the next week, something like that. That'll be cool. So I'm actually launching an Enigma 2.0 server, but I'm not launching that server until like February of next year. So I figured I may as well get things released publicly, get some playtesting done, so that then I'm in a better position for the masses when Deep North comes out. I don't know when it's going to come out, you know. Optimistically, people think that it's going to be Q1. You know, maybe that's true. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But I want to be in a situation where by the time Deep North comes out, I have a polished, really fun to play Valheim experience that lasts longer and is more interesting from the beginning, right? Because like basically I think that if I can give people better access to the mid game and the end game, that's my chance to reach more people. Makes sense? Because that's what Valheim sort of fails to do. That's the thing that Valheim struggles with. So that's the idea. I don't know how it's going to work, but at this point, honestly, last night I made loads and loads of progress on Enigma 2.0. I got I've fully reworked the quests for the boats. Players had had a bunch of issues with that, so that's all like changed, and I could go into that, but for now I don't want to get too sidetracked because I still need to talk about dungeons. So why don't we actually start by doing it this way? I'm gonna go location, register, Shard Fortress, and then locations, reset, zone, max distance equals 1. Oh. I tried to get away, but I didn't get away in time. Now I'm in jail. That's funny. Okay. get away from there. All right. Okay, so resetting dungeons. This is what I want to talk about. I'm going to show you the Charred Fortress because it's really visual and it's really fun to reset it. But the same concept applies to all dungeons in Valheim. So the burial chambers, the crypts, the mountain frost caves. I guess technically the Charred Fortress isn't a dungeon. Goblin Camp isn't a dungeon. I'm acting like they're dungeons. In my head, they are overworld dungeons. Make sense? Technically, they're camps. You know, they're not the same. But I'm going to treat them as the same. These are the places that provide combat experiences to the player or whatever is in the dungeon, progression, whatever it is. Before I get into resetting them and what I consider the most effective mechanism, just in general for people to use, I want to point out that Valheim in general has been designed in a way that has taught players certain habits. One of those habits is that players look for areas that have a lot of dungeons. Like, for example, they want a swamp that has 5 sunken crypts, or 10 sunken crypts, or 12. They don't find value in a swamp that just has 1 sunken crypt. That's like too little to be useful, too little to be worth the investment of finding, building the portal hub, building the base, whatever you do, building the dock, sailing there, etc., etc. So what I find to work better is that instead of having many dungeons that don't respawn, you have one dungeon that is huge that does respawn. And there's a lot of reasons for this. One is because Valheim itself is not optimized for multiplayer. The game itself was designed and produced for LAN multiplayer. That's it. So like you play multiplayer with people in the same room as you, it's made for that. You'll probably have a decent experience. But if you're playing multiplayer with people in the other parts of the world who you don't know, who you met online, you're going to have a bad experience. Like that's just how it is, right? So my philosophy is like, all right, we got to look at what the game already does and figure out how to make its strengths stronger and its weaknesses less obvious. Makes sense? So one of the problems in normal Valheim is that it encourages players to value lots of dungeons near each other. The problem, though, is that that causes the loaded zone to have a lot of stuff in it. Okay, because the way dungeons work in Valheim, like let's go find Sunken Crypt. Locations, list, Sunken Crypt. Okay, we're just going to go to the bottom one on the list. 4,300, 1,000. So whenever you go to a dungeon in Valheim, you go inside it, right? But what's actually happening is you're getting teleported 5,000 meters into the sky, okay? So here we're outside the actual dungeon layer. This is the external of the dungeon. So we can see the whole Sunken Crypt, right? This is the whole thing from the outside. Looks all trippy. It's contained within this thing called an environment box. If you look up, you can see it's like a square, right? So all dungeons have to fit inside one of these boxes. So the big ones feel big because they go up and down. And that allows them to be huge. You can actually make an enormous dungeon in Valheim. It just has to go up and down. You can't have it go sprawling side to side, okay? But what I'm getting at is like, this is what a dungeon is in Valheim, okay? It's actually up in the sky. And the reason this matters is because when you're on the ground, it has actually loaded the dungeon up there. You just don't see it. But the instances are there. It's loaded the monsters inside that dungeon, okay? So this has an impact on your performance. So basically what happens normally is you find a swamp and players are drawn to the areas where there's one crypt and they can see like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, they'd love an area where they can see 5 different crypts all at once. But if you can see 5 different crypts, that means that you have 5 crypts worth of instances in one single loaded zone. This causes Valheim's bad networking to be at its worst. Make sense? So that's why in general, like, the whole notion that dungeons don't respawn is one of the reasons that Valheim is laggy. I know that sounds a bit unrelated, but it's because by having one respawning dungeon. So now that I've elaborated on that a little bit, let me actually check this out here. Looks like I had a little spike of internet issue there, but it's okay. So now you understand why respawning dungeons is really important. There's even more reasons I can get into, but basically what works best is having one dungeon and then not anything else near it, because this way you can make the dungeon deeper, but it'll still be a less laggy experience compared to what the players are used to, because Valheim will spawn multiple combat areas near each other. So you can have a couple sunken crypts in the same loaded zone and a burial chamber in the Black Forest nearby. That kind of thing happens, right? You could have a goblin camp in the plains nearby, and then also another, Mistlands area in the Mistlands nearby. If you're in the right biome and it's all in the same loaded zone, you end up with a lot of stuff there, right? So that's where the ability to reset the dungeon comes in. Most server managers will employ a situation where the server itself runs the reset. This works at small scale, but ultimately, the best option is to allow the players themselves to reset dungeons one by one, okay? And the reason this works so well is because it gives you a reward or an incentive. You can use it as an item sink because the players want to reset the dungeon. They want to respawn it. So you now have the option of figuring out how they're going to pay for it, how they're going to deal with it, right? So in Path of Magic, there's 2 ways, or in Enigma Mode, sorry. There's 2 ways to reset dungeons. You can go into it, right? And you have to be at the entrance, but outside. You can just build the coin pile, right? And then it's like, all right, you got 10 seconds to run out of the way. And then boom, it does a bunch of stuff, crazy visuals, and then boom, there you go. Reset the dungeon. And it got rid of all the monsters, right? So there you end up with the players being able to reset one dungeon for 999 coins. As long as each dungeon gives you more than 999 coins, you can see how it creates a loop. You no longer need 8 different dungeons, or 5 or 4, or whatever it is. You only need 1. And then you just keep respawning it. And if you get bad RNG and sometimes you don't get enough coins, that's okay. Because most of the time, you'll get more than enough coins for what you want. And that's the basics of the dungeons on Enigma Mode. It's all designed around there just being one dungeon, and it's deeper, and there aren't that many dungeons nearby. Like, for example, if we now go locations, list, and we go zone max distance equals 2, we can see that we have a sunken crypt, some graves, some infested trees, but we just have one sunken crypt. Let's make it max distance 3 and see how that looks. Oh. Okay, so now we have max distance 3, and we have one sunken crypt 4. and a bunch of other locations, but we don't have anything else. And that doesn't happen in Vanilla Valheim's world generation. Vanilla Valheim, again, is not optimized for multiplayer. So you end up with a load of instances for trees and rocks, and with locations that are quite close to one another. So you end up in a situation where you have a loaded zone that may have 3 or 4 dungeons and all the other locations and 6,000 trees and rocks. So you can imagine how, like, even before you get to the point where the player's been building stuff, like, that's a bunch of stuff that has to go through the networking. So my philosophy is we can't really fix the networking. Iron Gate has to fix that if they're going to. I don't think they will. But we can't change it. What we can do is make it so we put less stuff through it. Make sense? And that's why if you look up here, we have a 1,200 instance count, even though it looks like we're surrounded by trees, right? And there's a dungeon right here. So including the dungeon, all the monsters and everything else, there's only, like 1,300 instances. There would normally be between 3,000 and 4,000 instances in a swamp like this, and a dungeon nearby. But because of these tricks and making the assets bigger and optimizing everything for a multiplayer experience, we've been able to reduce the instance count significantly almost everywhere. So in some places in Enigma Mode, you'll experience an instant count that's half. In other places, it's only like a quarter of what it normally would be. So Black Forest is normally like 6,000. Now it's normally like 2,000 if you're near a bunch of locations. So now you're getting a sense of that, right? Ideally, you have respawning vegetation that moves around. You have a rock respawning system, but you have to make sure that you stop it from working once the player's built something there, because you don't want the rocks like spawning into their base over and over again. That's really frustrating for them. I know this because I've frustrated many people developing all of these systems, so I can tell you from experience what people have already been frustrated by. You know, I'm not being hypothetical. Hey, welcome Ulrich, welcome. I hope you're doing well. Good to see you here. We've been talking a lot today about the different sorts of world generation, like respawning, dungeons, vegetation, and rocks and metal. So I think it's a big part of the Valheim experience that is sort of like one of the big things that is pretty simple to improve that makes a big difference once you've improved it. But what I want to show you now is something interesting, right? So as you saw earlier, the player can get 999 coins, build a pile, and then respawn the dungeon that way. But there's actually another way to do it. Because what I found is that when you give players the ability to do something like this, it's actually really, really useful as a motivator. Because basically anytime the players want something, now that thing could become an item sink or a reward for a mechanic, or you can tie it into something else. Make sense? So basically, I realized, like, okay, the game itself already gives coins, but they don't really feel much value. So if you give a lot of reasons to use coins, a lot of different uses to coins, you end up making the whole game feel better. Because suddenly, the player actually wants the coins. So they might actually go into the burial chamber, even though they're in Plains progression, to get coins faster. You know, if you can get coins to be useful for players, it enriches the Valheim experience really effectively. So that's another thing, a whole other thing. That's why the Diverger trading systems exist, but I'm not going to talk about all that stuff. What I want to show for now is another example of this notion that you can solve multiple problems with the same system. And ideally, you solve 3 or 4 problems with one system that, like, piggyback into each other, right? So we have this location respawning problem, right? But have you ever noticed how there's these gemstones? Like, for example, we have the gemstone blue, gemstone red, and gemstone green, right? These are Ashland's gemstones. But aside from making the weapon once, so what? Do they really feel like gemstones? Because a gemstone, to really get the right vibe, it has to feel valuable. Like it's worth something. It's worth it. Makes sense? It has to hold its weight in coin, so to speak, right? So that's kind of a separate issue, right? We have this location problem. Okay, players need a way to respawn locations. We also have this other issue that gemstones themselves, one, most players don't get any because they're Ashlands only. So by the time you experience gemstones, you're like probably about to quit playing for your session. Like realistically, most players just never get that far. So there's these gemstones in the game that look really cool and they have cool models. Like I like how they look. Oh, I accidentally did it. Okay, I wasn't trying to do that, but here's what I'm getting at. You can use what are currently unused items or things that aren't effectively utilized, and you can tie them in together so that in this case, for example, all right, now 3 gemstones allows you to reset a whole dungeon without paying 999 coins. That basically means that you save 999 coins by resetting the dungeon. Oh my god, I got the lucky one. I just realized that. One second, let me sip my tea here. Now I gotta test this. Because this is only a 1% chance for it to happen. Basically, most of the crypts are blue. Obviously, you're used to them being green, but in Enigma mode, they're blue. Okay, and they're harder. The reason they're blue is to remind people, like, Ayo, this is not what you're used to. It's more challenging, right? It looks different. It's a different color, okay? But there's a 1% chance that it turns into a charred crypt. But this is a really old script, so I do not know if it's going to work. So give me a moment here. Crypt key? So if it worked, when we go inside, the monsters will all be Twitchers, basically. The Warner works, that's great. Okay, so they're not all Twitchers. Ah, yeah, and the chests get upgraded. Wow, is this script actually working? That's hilarious. Okay, now if the script really works, then killing these Twitchers will drop iron. I'll have to see, though. Oh, wait, one second. Spicer. And then you have to find the right one. The Grey Dwarf Spicer, Black Metal Scrap Spicer. I'm looking for the Crypt Spicer. Let's see. Okay, so what I want to check is basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to have it so when the player does find this, they're rewarded by a bunch of iron. So basically what I need to do is instead of charred bones, which are basically useless, the charred bone, when it gets made in this situation, is just going to get turned into iron scrap. So let's... I already have a system here that does this. Yeah, see. So this converts bone fragments into iron scrap, okay? But these monsters don't drop bone fragments. right? So let's see if I handled it. All right, entrails also get converted, and then charred bone gets converted as well. But the charred bone, let's see, charred bone created, sunken crypt, player. Ah, it doesn't happen if the player is right there. Okay, why did I do it that way? I'm gonna get rid of this. So I think I was trying to encourage melee or something. Oh no, I know what this is. This is from back when I didn't know about picked up true. So basically, I thought, okay, I can do this, but what happens when the player makes a charred bone by throwing it out of their inventory? Then it gets converted, so then the player has an infinite source of just converting into iron scraps, and that's no good. But I don't need this anymore because now I can just do this. Filter player picked up, I think. Is that it? Wait, no. Not picked up. Yeah, so I want a banned filter. I think I can just do it like this. Let's see. Yeah, player picked up. There we go. Nice. Okay. So that means that all of these systems probably had this out-of-date format. That's pretty funny. Okay, so what that means is the bone gets created, and then there is no longer a player banned object. That was causing the thing to not happen here. Okay, so basically we're just gonna replace. I'm just gonna find this occurrence everywhere in the file, and then we're going to replace it with this thing I just pasted. Okay, so I know it looks a little finicky, but we find everything, we see those 4 matches, and then we just paste, boom. Okay, now they're all recreated. This should drastically increase the amount of iron people get, to be honest. It's pretty funny. I wonder how long this has just been not right. Okay, so now bone fragments get turned into more iron. In this case, not always. But let me make sure I understand this right. So, bone fragment created spawns iron. Most of the time. Bone fragment created doesn't. Okay, so basically these weights are all wrong, but it means like half the time you get it, half the time you don't. Entrails, it's the same thing. Half the time you get it, half the time you don't. Then for charred bone, it needs to be really extreme because these are really rare. They need to be very special, like ridiculously overdone, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to make it so all of the charred bone that gets created will turn into iron scrap. And sometimes the charred bone won't remove itself. Okay? This is just going to make it so there's some charred bone as well, but most of the time it's just iron scraps that the monsters drop. So charred bone, charred bone. We have the remove true at... That needs to be gone. Remove. Okay. No, I did this backwards. This one, the less common one, doesn't remove it, and the more common one does. There we go. Okay, so now I should be good. Now I can, like, let's see, I should be able to kill one of these twitchers. Let's go, or this charred warrior here. This looks like an ideal candidate. Okay, so we got him. And then what happened? Look at that. I see it already. Yeah, we got scrap iron. Nice. Okay, but is it a lot of scrap iron? I like how they don't float anymore. That's really awesome. EWP got upgraded. The items, the extra spawns used to like float weirdly in the sky, but they don't now. It feels like... Yeah. I know what to do. I'm going to keep it like this, but I'm going to double it. So it's... Basically, you can just keep killing the charred monsters and then get more iron that way. Basically, let's just see a little bit here. The chests are generating nice. That's cool. As you can tell, it's basically just a normal crypt, except it has the mobs replaced with stronger monsters, right? So there we go, that works. We getting the iron. Okay, this looks solid. I think I can just adjust this. What I'm gonna do is make it so that the iron scraps get spawned in a pile of 2. Okay, so we're just gonna go 0, and then stack 2. What's the data? Yeah, stack 2. I have it already. Okay, awesome. Bum-ba-da-bum. Stack 2. Boom. Alright, and then also for this one. Good, good. Nice. This should make it so that these red crypts are a source of a lot of iron, and that should make them more rewarding. To be honest, actually, let's make it stack 3. I think that'll make it even better. Alright, nice. Now, I actually was surprised that that spawned properly. This is really old, and there was a problem that I blind scripted and fixed a while ago, and it turns out I actually did fix it, and I usually assume what I did breaks. So that works out great. So now what I want to show is one last thing. Well, not one last thing related to dungeon generation, and then I'm going to show you the world serpent. I'm going to work more on that for a little bit. Bum bum. Okay, there should be a charred fortress here somewhere, and I want to show you. Basically, Dakar has this script for visually destroying stuff. Let me see if I can find it actually in VWE and config share. Yeah, okay, and dam buster collapsing structures. Here we go. Okay, so basically Dakar made this thing. So he used it for a different purpose than I did, but basically you see how it visually makes it collapse like that? So what shows it even better is, yeah, this video here. Watch this. Yeah, you see that? So basically it's timed destructions where the distance from the event changes the timing of the destruction. So it makes a ripple. Okay, so I took that basic logic and then I applied it because I've been trying to make the charred fortress reset less laggy. Ultimately, there's a moment where when you reset a charred fortress, it lags. Make sense? But actually, I'm just going to put one right here. Here we go. Bum-ba-dum, location, register, charred fortress. So what I realized is it's actually the pieces getting deleted that cause the lag, okay? So I'll show you what I mean in a second. But one of the recurring themes with development and scripting that's really important is this notion of multiple things with one stone, multiple problems with one mechanic, okay? So here, for example, we have the Charred Fortress, and we can reset it, right? As you saw earlier with the dungeons, we can do the same thing. The Charred Fortress is a little bit different. For example, let's say I build this coin pile here. Nothing happens, okay? One, players can't actually build near Charred Fortresses, so they can't even do that in the first place. But what they would actually have to try and do is the gemstones from earlier, right? So let's say they have 3 iolite, right? Normally, 3 gemstones would be able to reset a location. But if I get on the ground here and I try to reset this location, I can throw this iolite, but then it rejects it. It says I have to destroy the altar first. So for these things, you can't actually reset the Charred Fort until you have conquered it, so to speak. And the fort is conquered when this thing is destroyed. Okay? So now the fort is resettable. Obviously, the player couldn't just fly in and reset it. They'd have to destroy stuff, right? But so if we take that same iolite, right? Now I'm going to act like I'm a player. Let's stop this event real quick. You can take the same iolite, move it forward. Now, you see what's happening? The fortress eats itself using like an inverse of that same script that you just saw that Dakar showed. And then there's a bit of a lag spike, and then the fortress remakes itself. So I found that basically the way I had it set up before, there was a bigger lag spike anyway. So I figured if I make it so when the location resets, everything's already deleted, then that'll take away some of the pressure from the location reset. Because if you just delete it all at once, that's just 4,000 pieces, just boom, gone. Makes sense? And that makes more of a lag spike. So it was a cool example of where you can combine something. So I used this script that Dakar made, combined with the location reset script, to produce something that looks more intense, but is more efficient performance-wise. And I love that combination. That's always like a really awesome combination, when something can look bigger but take up less instances. You know what I mean? I'm just going to do that one more time, just because it looks really cool. I like seeing the fortress like dissolve into pieces. Wrong item? What's that message from? I don't even know. It's funny. Okay. Here's our gemstones. So now I just toss them. And now we can look at it from a different view, right? I love just how it just falls apart. It's so cool. And then boom, there's the lag spike. And so basically, it used to not have all of those explosions, but the lag spike was super obvious. And something I found about lag spikes is if you time them right with explosions, they make more sense to the player. So like if the player just sees something disappear and then there's a lag spike, they notice the lag spike. Where if they see something start exploding and then there's a lag spike, it's as if the lag spike is more acceptable. Does that make sense? Because players will always notice lag spikes. They're definitely problematic. But if you have to use one, you can get away with it if you make it look like there's something causing it. Make sense? Because like if the player sees, that whole rock just blew up and it spiked a lag spike, okay. They seem to be more understanding. But if they're just like walking around normally and then there's suddenly a lag spike, they don't like that. They don't like it at all. So it's like the one situation where an explosion is the better the better recommendation, to be honest. Let's see, what am I at? An hour and a half. Nice. Pretty good. Pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is World Serpent stuff. So we're going to remove the key for no map. And I'm going to spawn a world serpent, okay? But I'm gonna spawn it... Ow. I'm gonna spawn it the traditional way. Actually, no, I'm not gonna do that. I don't have enough time. I'm gonna just make it with the command, bring world serpent. Okay. So now the world serpent has risen. Now is the moment of truth. We changed the helix math earlier. Did we change it? Did we change it enough? Let's see. Oh, that looks like a no. Yeah, I changed the wrong part of the math, as you can see. So, interesting. Yeah, now it like offset them. That's pretty interesting. Oh, they're on like a different rotation now? I see. That's funny. Okay, well that makes sense. I just changed like a random number that I didn't know what it was, so... Yeah, basically this thing here... I was hoping I could just do it simply. But there's something I have wrong in the math, so... Like, what I'm going for with these helix is for them to be... kind of like... equally spaced apart, if that makes sense. So, like, now they're, like, the logic is all sorts of crazy, right? Like, it's, like, going down over there. I don't know what that's about. But what I'm actually going for is something like DNA, except with 3 parts. Make sense? So that's the beginning of the world serpent. It goes down here. Spawns special diverger. There's a bunch of mastercrafted diverger. And then also the boat quests. I redid all the boat quests. So I may as well show you guys the boat quest in a moment. I know that's something players have been wanting me to do that for a while, and I've just been like putting it off, so I'm glad I finally got it over with. I didn't redo the 3rd boat, but people don't really use that one much anyway. I don't know if people even know how to get it, to be honest, so I just redid the first 2. So let's keep going until we find one of the quests. Bum 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 bum. Master crafter. We're looking for a boat master. Builder. Beast master. Almost a boat master. Not quite though. Halderling? 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 I don't remember naming anything that. That's funny. Huh. Honestly, I have no idea what that name is. Normally, they're stuff I recognize. Alright, another fishmonger. Eventually, one of these will be a... quest verger. Mastercraft, fishmonger. I probably don't need that many fishmongers, to be honest. Builder. We're looking for a banker. That's nice. Hunter. We're looking for a longship master or a tune master, carve master. They'll show up eventually. There we go. Okay, here's a carved shipmaster. Alright. So I'm going to show how I redid the quests. Although, at this point, nah. It's not too much of a thing. I've kind of lost my mojo. My voice is hurting, so I'll end the stream soon. But, I want to show this, because basically the other quests were too abstract, and you had to, like, learn how to do them and research it from other players. So, I wanted to design it so that the player can just find the guy and not know what it is, and then they'll learn how to do the quest without any outside information, okay? So you find the carved shipmaster, right? And then he's like, hey, I'm pretty sure the player can figure out what to do next, right? Every time I move, he says, build me 2 stacks of fine wood. Okay. Pretty clear, right? So, fine wood, we would find it somewhere, right? And that means we would need 100 fine wood. Build 1. And now he's saying, I need 1 more stack. Okay. We build 2. Okay. Now he's like, hey, here you go. The tune. Fill your carve with 200 amber pearls and bring it here. And it says some other stuff that I need to explain. So it needs a little bit more work, but basically now he says, all right, bring your carve nearby with 200 amber pearls in it. Okay? So let's get our pearls. Basically, this quest, because he's on the World Serpent, I wanted to make sure that it works realistically, like how the players are going to use it, right? So here we have a carve. I'm in the Ashlands. I know the carve's going to get wrecked. Whatever. It's fine. Hey! Calm down. He set my boat on fire. That bastard. Okay. Anyway, we have our carve here, right? So I should just be able to fill it up. I have 200 of these things, right? And now, as long as I sail underneath him, then boom, there we go. I need to redo the timing for the messaging. It's a little bit off. But now look at this. We have our tune. I'm getting my buffs, and the tune is like crazy, crazy, crazy fast. It's the fastest ship of them all. See? Super fast. Can sail right off the edge of the world. So that's how the boat quests work now. Players probably won't find the quest masters straight away, but they can. Like, so it's possible to find them before you get to the World Serpent. I don't know. Oh, this is fun. Nice. I don't know if... Whoa, I actually didn't realize that the World Serpent went this far down. That's really funny. Not the World Serpent, sorry. The World Tree. I didn't realize it actually overlapped the edge like this. I thought it was more flush with the horizon. That's pretty cool. But anyway, that's how the quests work. It needs like a little bit of adjustment to the timing so that the messages aren't like that. The hell's with this lava? Huh. Funny. It's the little things, I guess. Does it think it's Ashlands? Why is there lava there? I guess we'll never know. That's funny. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. So now you guys know about location generation, and if you want, you can message me like privately to get the files for all that. I can just give them to people when they ask for them, or you can download it in Enigma. That's fine as well. Also, if you want to like try the alpha of Enigma before I release 2.0, you can just ask me for the files. I'm happy to share them. If you're listening at this point and interested, feel free to do that. Aside from that, I'll just keep working on this, and to be honest, I think probably I'll release 2.0 pretty soon. Maybe like next week. I'm really happy with how this has turned out. Like at first, the World Serpent, it was like too blank. It felt kind of weird. And then in the Ashlands area, I didn't really like it. But now, there's something about like the angles and the chaos. I just need to get these 3 spirals to work together right. But aside from that, I think it'll be great. I'm really happy with how it looks. And even, I know it like looks weird to have like floating stuff, but there's something about these things, these red things. And when these are here, to me it like visually makes sense. It's like, oh, that's magical floating ether. That's why everything near it doesn't have gravity. Like, obviously that's nonsense, right? But it feels like it works. So before I go, let's just go. Let's go the other direction, actually, so I can show you. We'll see some Black Forest gen, Mistlands gen, and then Ocean gen and Deep North gen. Because right now, we've just seen the World Serpent from the point of view of the Ashlands. But it actually changes its biome depending on where it is, right? So now we'll just go this way. We can see how it looks. So far, I like most of them. The ocean one is a little plain, but maybe that works out because the Mistland one is less plain in the Ashlands as well. So maybe it helps with the contrast, right? So far, my favorite ones are the Ashlands one and then the Mistlands one. I like it when there's like these constellation areas like this that are really big. I think that's pretty cool. I also like how the trees and the Mistlands actually like snap onto the terrain properly. That's also really cool. And then there's some little subtle differences. Like right now, this is technically Black Forest. So because of that, there's a copper node, right? So it's like, technically you can get loads of resources because when you pop one of these rocks, yeah, it just drops everything. So it's really easy to mine because there's nothing supporting it, right? They're just floating up in the air. So I should just be able to keep going here, and eventually we'll get to the Deep North gen, which is pretty similar. It just doesn't have... It like has more ice in it. Make sense? Just keep going here. Yeah, this is the ocean gen, or maybe the mountains. Or actually, are we in Deep North now? No, this is Deep North. Yeah, so Deep North just has more of these kind of ice rock kind of things. Obviously, once they actually launch Deep North, I'll be able to make this way more interesting. Because right now, I mean, I'm just using, like, the same assets that are already in the biome, right? Which is just, like, this stuff. Pretty much it. Fishmongers. Okay, there's too many fishmongers. I'm gonna fix that before I have to remember it. Bum bum bum. Where is that on the starter? Yeah, okay. So 0.3. What should we have more of? I guess the fishmonger, not important up here. The blacksmith is also not so important. So I just gained 3%. The foreman guy, he's pretty useful because you can sell metal to him. And these are going to have like bases, so that'll be useful. You can also acquire metal up here. Banker is very useful. Longship master and carve master. Okay. So now I can basically spread. I have 3 percentage points. I guess I can make it be like 9. Do 9 and 9. And I have one more. I need to shave off something. Let's shave it off the banker. Nice. Okay. Those are the kinds of things that, like, sometimes just noting something takes longer than actually just changing it. Makes sense? So basically what I want to make sure, that once there is one of these mobs here, like we have the 2 shipmasters, right? If we actually update their info here, now they look more normal, right? Now that they're here, we want to make sure that the diverger that are spawning are useful, right? So they should mostly be coin traders and different specialists. So we had a bank trader, we had those 2 quest diverger. So we shouldn't have any more bankers, and we shouldn't have any more right? Now we have another carved shipmaster, but that other one was right over there. So probably in this case, what I should do is use the band objects here and actually increase the distance. So we're gonna go max distance. Let's go for like 300. Because it's fine if they're near each other, just not too near each other. They shouldn't be in the same loaded area. Make sense? All right. So this looks pretty solid, though. I like the variety of the assets. One thing I noticed early on is it was pretty boring if it was always the same. So I made it so there's like 3 outcomes. You can have just like nothing, or you can have a whole bunch of other stuff. Oh, good question, Ulrich. So Ulrich Gaming and Music asked how you get onto the Serpent. So your question's funny because you asked how do you get onto the Serpent in vanilla. So in vanilla, obviously there is no like true vanilla, there is no Serpent. But basically, when you're playing Enigma, you have these paths, right? Let me load one up real quick. Here we go. All right, so let's see which path would be faster. Probably this one. Basically, there's a path. As you move around, I was flying, so it stopped building, but as you move around, it will build in front of you. Make sense? And then every now and then, the path is going to stop. And it's going to ask for a payment or a tribute. Okay, so right here, it stopped and it has a 1. Makes a staircase right next to that charred fortress. Alright, whatever. So then you pay the toll, and it keeps going. And the further the path goes, the closer to the edge of the world, the more expensive that toll is. So it just cost us 1 coin pile, but it'll be 2, and then 3, and then the most expensive it becomes is 4. Okay? So you can imagine how this path will just keep going and going and going and going and going. Well, eventually... Oh, actually, you know what? I can probably just log into another world that I already generated it on, and I'll show you. But basically, the first path to reach the end of the world will then make a... How do I put it? It will make a portal to the World Serpent, and it will make the World Serpent rise. So when the world first starts, there is no World Serpent. But eventually, the players build one of these paths to the world's edge. That causes the World Serpent event, which then rises the whole World Serpent up. And that's how players get onto the World Serpent. Make sense? So this is an older build I had, and you can see how, like, in this one, the spirals are actually, like, mostly working. Right? So you see one spiral, there's another spiral. There's actually 2 of them in, like, a double helix. So what I'm trying to do is make there be 3 of these spiral things. That's pretty much all I'm trying to do. It's pretty simple. So... let's make sure you understand this map thing, though. Alright, is this... No, this is not the right world. I gotta find a world that I actually generated the paths on. Probably... let's go a bit further down. Maybe over here. But originally, yeah, I've actually gone through a lot of thinking with this, but originally the idea was to make world levels. So like you beat something, and then there's a new world level, and then you unlock the world serpent, or you unlock something else. But I realized, like, things have to happen before the player stops playing. Otherwise, they never do them. If that makes sense. So now I have a different philosophy. These also don't have extended paths. So here you can actually see the thing. But yeah, basically, you build that path all the way to the edge. But it's not just that. There's actually also another mechanic I haven't shown you. So it's called rising. So as long as you have the world serpent in sight, you can use something called rise. So you type rise, and then you'll get teleported 100 meters up in the sky, but with slow fall. So the idea here is to make the floating rocks as accessible to players as possible, so that they can more easily find like a spot to build their base on. Or let's say they fall off of the serpent. I want to make it so like it's not like game over for you. You can actually escape, right? So that's the idea. Unfortunately, I can't actually get rid of slowfall once I've given it. So the character gets like permanent snowfall until they die. Until they die or log out, pretty much. But this means that the player has a way to get up to the serpent, even if they're like on the ground level, right? Because like we can be in the water over here. Eventually I'll get there. And then we can just use rise. And we'll get up to the level, right? So we do it again. And that's how you get like up to the world serpent from down below it. I think actually I should make rise work. Maybe like 130. 1 second. Yeah, instead of 100, let's do 130. Because it should be able to get there in just one go. Yeah, and then it still has the max, so you can't use it again if you're over that. Okay. But that's how you get up here. But also, the World Serpent itself has a teleportation system. So basically, this might be old gen, so it might not work, so bear with me. But I should be able to go ride north, for example. And then boom, I'm teleported to the north. Okay? So let's look at our map. Yeah, now you can see I'm in the far north. Now, let's say I want to go to the east. I just go ride E. And then boom. It looks like my east teleporter is a little bit off there, as you can see here. This is the teleporting skull, so it needs to be over here. Interesting catch. Actually, let's see if the same thing happens for west. Ride west. But so you can see how the whole World Serpent itself like changes a lot of the traveling system, as you can see. Because now, as long as you can see the World Serpent, you can teleport to any of the extreme edges of the world. So it's sort of like just the edge of the world becomes practically useful. And that was kind of one of the ideas. Is like I wanted to make it so that there's actually reasons to go to the edge of the world. Like in this case, you get to the World Serpent, you can get up to it. And then now, like this spot right here, this island, is technically right next to... Oops. Is technically right next to this island. Even though they're thousands and thousands of meters apart, right? Because of how the World Serpent traveling system works, they're actually right next to each other. But if you're in the center of the world, you can't use the teleport system because you have to be in sight of the World Serpent, right? So like right now, I could use the teleport system. Well, at least I could have until I died. That's the idea. Now, let's fix the skulls real quick. I think it's in Bifrost Starter. It's this one. Okay, so this is the last thing I'll do in this live stream, but now that I've seen this, it looks like the skulls are not spawned in the exact right position. So it looks like the east and the west is too far offset. And I need to try the other one. So let's go God, and then first we're going to go ride south. See if that works. Yeah, you're right, Ulrich. Valheim is incredible. There's so many possibilities. I think people have only really just started to tap into all that. Why did I get put here on the ground? Doesn't make sense. That makes no sense. Will it happen again? Ride south. Oh, it won't even let me teleport now? Oh no, it's saving, so something weird is happening here. Was I too far? Curious. Okay, maybe actually. I just realized something. That could have been an old... It was like pretty far down on the list, so it might have been an older gen where I didn't align the skulls properly. So I'm just going to test on a newer generation of the World Serpent to make sure that the teleporting skulls are working. Because basically, you make a teleport spot by spawning an object there, and then you target that object to send the player to that object. Make sense? That's how it works. So, in this case, yeah, nice. We have our World Serpent. Now I should just be able to teleport to any of these 8 spots, north, south, east, west, northeast, southwest, east, all those. And then, just like there, I just got sent to the center of it, right? So that's basically what we want to happen for each one. But probably it won't happen because I got the spawn points off a little bit. So now I need to see which one. So north, yeah, north is okay. You can still see, though, I didn't go into the center of it, right? So it is still offset, but for now, that's fine. So let's see if south is also okay. Hey, welcome, Arby. Welcome, welcome. So Arby says, how was the World Serpent and flying core spirals built at that scale? I assume it's perfectly symmetrical. Did you build one section, then do some coding magic? Yeah, basically, so... well, I tried to remove the key fly. That's funny. Okay, so ride south is wrong. One moment. I'll answer your question in a moment. Let me just make sure that this actually doesn't work. Yeah, why does it teleport here, but then won't teleport when I'm here? It's kind of weird. Huh. Interesting. Okay, now I can get to your question. Okay, so... Oh, tiny bit off. That's funny. Yeah, I'll figure out the alignment of those. I just need to, like, find each one and manually put the position in. Basically, these skulls get spawned here, right? So when the World Serpent rises, it spawns all the teleport skulls. But then it moves them based on their data, right? So if we look for a teleport skull north, we'll find the data, okay? So you can see here, it says position this, position that. I messed up these numbers, so I just need to adjust them a little bit. It'll be like, boom, that kind of thing. But I'll deal with that later. For now, you make an interesting question. How was the World Serpent and Flying Core Spirals built at that scale? So basically, Valheim has special prefabs. Most prefabs are not scalable in vanilla, meaning you can scale them by using a mod, but the clients also need the mod, okay? When I say scalable with vanilla, I mean that you can put this in a world, and a vanilla client can connect to it, and they will see the scaled asset, all right? So there are certain assets that are scalable. An easy way to find them is to use Haloa's blueprint tool. So you go to valheimtools.stream and then wiki. And then prefabs. And then scalable. You can sort it this way. So you'll get a list of all of the vanilla scalable things that are in the game, okay? And so there's a lot of stuff that is scalable, but compared to how many things are in the game, most things are not scalable. So we're now, yeah, we just hit the end of the list. So there's like, I think like 80 scalable prefabs out of like thousands. So you kind of have to work with what's available. So let's see if we can find this flying core here. Ah, I see. So by, yeah, here we go. This is the flying core. So just to be clear, I will answer the actual question. I'm just covering the context so that other people understand. When something is scalable in Valheim, you can scale it, but not just on one axis. You can scale it in like just one axis or in all three. Does that make sense? So you can make something really flat and spherical if it isn't normally flat and spherical. Make sense? You can stretch things and you can squish them. But when you do that, you change the distance it loads from. So like these load from far away because they're made bigger. But if you make these things really small, these like glowy things, then they end up disappearing right as you look at them. Okay? So the best way I can actually show you RB is by logging on to an old world that doesn't have the World Serpent. And then I'll go to where it isn't, and then I'll trigger it to grow, and then you'll see what happens. And so now I'm going to address the other part of the scale, right? Because I just talked about the individual scale, but what you're really asking about is the scale of it itself. How do you make something that wraps around the entirety of the world, right? Like, is it like one blueprint? You know what I mean? Like that would be crazy, right? A blueprint that wraps around the entire world. You know what I mean? Oh, it's got to generate again. I gotta find a world that's already generated. I don't feel like waiting that long, to be honest. Bum, 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 bum. Let's see. Okay, so I want to find a world from a while ago, but not too a while ago. So maybe like one of these worlds. I'm just kind of guessing. But yeah, essentially it's coding. So basically you make a segment and then the segment follows math to spawn forward and at a little bit of an adjusted angle. Make sense? So why are these running regeneration again? It's actually kind of weird. That's another thing, though. Here, I'll try and find another one. I think I know a world that I can do it on. Bum, 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 bum. There should be one called testing. But this is something Dakar got me into, to be honest. Um, yeah, he does. So he does a lot of stuff with Infinity Hammer, where he uses like I think it's called zooping, but basically he makes a pattern that creates like a cylinder or a wall or something that repeats itself over and over and over again. So basically the history of it is the old server used to just be these paths through the world, right? And I made them manually. And then one of the players and Dakar were like, hey, why don't you try something that makes something automatic? And then that turned into these paths, okay? And basically, the path makes a section, and then another section, and then another section, and then another section, and it just keeps doing that over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, that's the premise of how they build. So the World Serpent is very similar. Basically, oh, this already has a World Serpent on it. That's fine. I'm just gonna delete the section, and then you'll see the generation happen that way. So basically, the World Serpent itself doesn't know that it takes up the whole world, right? And by the way, Dakar made this. The head. Dakar made the skull. That's what got me inspired to use the flying cores. I figured he could make something really cool, and then I could use the rest of it. So this actually works, because now you can see the World Serpent before. Like, this is what it was originally. It's just flat. Those trees aren't spawned. They're just there because they're underneath, and they automatically pop up there. But what I'm going to do now is I'll show you exactly how it works. So first off, let's spawn a hoe. Okay. So now I'm going to just delete basically all of this stuff. This is going to cause a bunch of rocks to respawn and whatever. Don't worry about that for now. That's my problem later. We're just going to delete here. And so what I'm deleting is the simplified version. And you can see how basically the thing itself is made out of these Ashland's rocks that have their scale messed with. You see what I mean? Like, you can probably tell which one it is if I just isolate it to one. Yeah, there we go. That'll work. So now you might be able to see better. This is actually four, I think. Yeah, okay. So it's this, see? But normally it's very pointy and very tall, spiked in the ground. They just so happen to have a completely flat base. So you can flip them over and then like stretch them out, right? And then you end up with something that looks sort of like scales. So that's why I went with it. Basically, I showed Dakar. I was like, this is what the body is going to look like. Are you interested in making a head for it? Because Dakar's really good at shaping things. Like, he can really quickly mold assets in Valheim like clay. Like, literally, like, if you watch him work, it's like he's using clay or something. Like, for me, I can figure out how to shape something differently, but it takes me forever. Like, it's definitely not quick. I can't just, like, get it to be how I want in, like, 30 seconds. It takes me, like, 20 minutes. Dakar just does it, like, immediately, though. But so basically what happens is it procedurally makes each section, and then it moves forward and makes another one, but it tilts it a tiny bit each time. And what I did is I painstakingly redid it over and over and over again until I learned the math that's exactly right to make it wrap around the edge of the world. Make sense? So now what we'll do is we'll actually spawn the head again. And then you'll get to see the generation happen right in front of us, okay? So let's go like this, and then just go say bring World Serpent. Okay, so it spawns all that. It moves very quickly. And the reason it moves so quickly is because it's so few instances. Like the whole thing, each one of these segments is only one instance, right? So like from here to here, it's like one instance. 2, 3, 4. Then you have all the rocks, obviously. That adds a bunch of extra stuff. But the whole main path, like this stuff, it's only 3,400 pieces to wrap all the way around the world. So you can imagine how it, like, basically what it's doing is it's just repeating one thing 3,000 times. And then there's a rule that says if you meet yourself, stop. Make sense? So anytime you do that, you'll end up with a circle. If you just spawn something in front of itself with a slight angle, you end up with a circle. So it's all a matter of figuring out, like, all right, if I spawn something 10,000 meters away from the world, how much does it need to turn to create a perfect circle around the Valheim world, right? And that just took a while of doing this. Like, we can see the path still generating, right? It's actually generating into itself right now, so it's gonna cause some weird doubling things, but that's fine. Normally that wouldn't happen because there's protections against it, but I'm just illustrating this, so I'm running it on an older world. So we should actually be able to watch it, right? Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Yep. It's funny. It's crazy how fast it is, to be honest. Really crazy. Yeah, so interesting point, RB, actually. So the rotation points you're used to, like how in Gizmo, for example, you can get 256 rotation points or whatever. In this, it doesn't work like that. Like, there is no limit. So, because it's just a rotation. So the limits you're used to are the player end stuff in Valheim and how they place pieces. It's like what, normally like 18, and then you can use Gizmo to make it like 256 or whatever, right? But for the actual game itself, it can place things any way that it wants. And really, like, it's not even like limited to 360 degrees. It could be like 346.333722221566663. You know what I mean? Like, it can be like really, really specific. So there's way, way more than like 360 possible rotation points. But let me actually find the Bifrost starter. Here we go. This is what you're asking about. So this is the magic angle that I had to research to figure out. If you spawn something 20 meters in front of itself, it needs to turn by 0.1135 degrees each spawn to end up with a perfect circle around the entire world. So, so yeah, it does a lot more than just 256 rotations. And that's actually one of the problems with the paths. Because even if you use Gizmo, you can't actually replace a path piece with the right rotation. And I understand why now, like why the players are limited. It's because if you allow like total freeform, then like you have to add so many angles that it gets really complicated. Like this, for example. Right? Like it almost looks straight, but it's not. It actually turns a little bit, right? So that means that each of these pieces has a different angle. So we take this hammer here, we destroy this piece, and now I'll try and remake it. It looks like it fits, but it's actually just a tiny, tiny bit off. As you can see. And so normally that's fine, but it's just like a little thing that, it's something to keep in mind, really. That's funny. Zeal told you to go to me and Dakar for math. Well, Dakar is the one who's really like I'll be really honest. Like, I learned things are possible because of Dakar, and now I know what's possible, so I can make something where I don't understand the math. Like, for example, the thing I was doing earlier. Where'd it go? Yeah, this thing. Okay, this, I was trying to make it make the helixes, and I thought that just having them offset in thirds would make it rotate in a perfect third, but it didn't, right? So, like, I don't know what I did wrong here, but, like, even these, I don't understand this math. Like, Dakar can do this kind of stuff because he's really comfortable with math. I know what's possible, and then I just use ChatGPT, and then I fuck with things over and over again because, like, ChatGPT doesn't do things right, if that makes sense. It does things, and then you need to mess with them a bit more to get them to work. So anytime you're trying to get complicated math to happen, GPTs are really useful. They're incredibly useful. So basically, I asked a car or ChatGPT. That's like how I figure things out. But now that I've done it more, I know that like most of the time, math is possible. Like if you want something to spawn facing a monster, or if you want to know where the player is facing and then make something happen, it's really complicated to think about it, but basically like you can just block off these things. Make sense? So like in Hive Mind, which is the chat between myself, Raka, Dakar, and Zeal, we basically like share stuff and teach each other and do that. Like we refer to this as the bracket magic. So in your head, you just make it so like this is just like this. It's like there you go. Like I don't even know. I don't know like okay, I could read this. Let's try and read it. Okay, multiply whatever cosine of add the multiple of the variable by multiplying it 2.3. Like you can read it, right? It's just complicated. And it's a lot easier to have ChatGPT go through something. Like for example, let's take this entry. And now if I just go and I make a new chat, like just do some random thing here. And then what ChatGPT is really good at is explaining scripts. So I'm just going to be like, tell me what this YAML script does. It's for a game called Valheim. Okay, like I'm being really generic, right? And I'm just going to give it this part here and let's see if it figures it out. It's generally incredibly good at breaking down scripts into English. It's not good at turning English into scripts. Make sense? So let's see what it says. It says, this YAML script spawns 3 objects each time it runs, arranged in a helix. It does this by doing this. Yeah, line by line. Okay. And it explains the stuff it makes. Pretty crazy, right? Now, what I've tried before actually is uploading like all of the files, and it's been able to describe to me what Enigma is. It's like, holy shit. It's really, really cool. So in general, GPT is incredibly useful for scripting, but not directly. If you try and get it to be like, hey, make me a script that does this, it's not good at that. But let's say I want help with something. I want to make a special monster that triangulates its location to the player's location and teleports behind the player to attack like a backstab. Okay? So like I can explain to GPT the logical circumstance. Okay? I'm like, all right, I need the mathematics to figure out what position is behind the player relative to where the monster is looking at the player from. Does that make sense? Like, maybe that sounds simple, but it's like this. Let's spawn a twig. What's he called? Battle Buddy? I don't remember what he's called. Yeah, let's spawn a twig. Okay. So, let's imagine we're making some kind of custom attack, and I want Twig here to teleport behind me. Make sense? So basically, he draws a line to me, and then teleports behind me. Okay? I can't do that easily. Like, there's a lot of logic you have to think about. Like, what? Okay, he teleports 2 meters behind you, but like, how... What about now? Is he gonna teleport to my back? He should teleport from where he is to behind me. You see what I mean? So, like, this is very complicated mathematically. But then you could just talk to ChatGPT and be like, okay, this is the situation. I need the logic mapped out so that I can use brackets, bracket math. I call it bracket math. I don't know what it's actually called. I need the logic mapped out so I can use bracket math to accomplish this. What is the math equation I need to get a POS that is 2 meters behind a target based on the position of the what's the monster? The monster originating the attack. Okay? So I'm not going to actually make this. I'm just showing you all like how you can use GPT and other similar things to explain the complexity, because these are things that it's really, 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 really good at. Like the Unity stuff just distracts it. Basically, what you tell GPT is that you're working with YAMLs, and then like, because the complicated part, like this stuff is all like the complicated stuff. What it's gonna do is you end up with something like this, and then that's basically a string that you can then convert into what works for EWP, right? So like this kind of stuff, and also like get POS X, like that wouldn't work. So this is where like you have to know how to format it, right? And so this is a situation where I would like give it something that it can use, right? So I would go into expand World Prefabs' documentation. Let's go to just like the normal read. Oh no, I don't want the locations. Yeah, let's go into the normal readme, and then you would find like some, or what is it, add? Yeah. So basically it has to be formatted like this. Okay. So now I would find the stuff that it needs, because I don't know. Remember, like, I don't know math very well, but I know, like, okay, it's trying to do the square root. It's squaring something. It's doing, like, sine and cosine and these things. So it's multiplying. It's doing this stuff. So basically, you would then show it this. So I may even be able to just get away with just pasting it and sending it. Sometimes you can be pretty vague and it works it out, but let's rework the equation to be in a format that works for my YAML script. Here's here's the rules for the mathematics. So sometimes you can just do stuff like this. And then it'll be like, oh, okay, you have these things and they have to be expressed this way. And then you have to still like understand some things, right? And this is where like Dakar can use AI and figure stuff out really fast. So I can also do it pretty quickly, but not as fast as Dakar can. Because Dakar knows, like, okay, this is a situation I would use cosine. This is a situation I would use the square root, blah, blah, blah. I have to, like, figure out that stuff. Make sense? But a lot of it is about triangulating. And once you get that down, then it's about, like, get a position, get something returned, etc., etc. But yeah, that's how it works. All right, RB, thanks for commenting, by the way. I appreciate it. It's always cool when people have specific questions. But anyway, I'm going to end this stream. Thanks for watching, everybody. It was fun showing off some of the stuff that's in development. If you have any questions, just comment below. Let me know. I do these development streams every Wednesday and every Friday for roughly 2 hours. So if you want to ask me some kind of question, it's the perfect time to do that. I'll have a thing I'm showing off in general, but the stream's more of a chance to interact with people and just kind of like help nurture this server management creative vibe. I think a lot of the server managers like kind of hide they keep the things to themselves. They're kind of scared of competition and losing players to other servers. So it tends to be a very fractured community, and I want to change that. I want to really open things up and help encourage people to share more and teach each other more, because the way I look at it is like we're providing these custom Valheim experiences. The better we get at this, the more players there will be interested in these experiences. So like it doesn't make sense to fight for scraps of the players that are interested when we can work together and make the scene so interesting that there's plenty of players for everybody. Make sense? That's like my mentality. That's why I share everything so openly. And that's why I encourage people to copy, take parts of the project, do whatever you want with them. You don't have to play Enigma Mode the way I design it. I design Enigma Mode to trigger you into becoming a scripter. So if you find yourself changing the files, like Enigma Mode is fulfilling its holy purpose. that's like really the goal. It's not just a game or a version of Valheim. It's a version of Valheim that gets people to make more versions of Valheim. It's like a social engineering project as well, in addition to what it is. A lot of this stuff is like that, to be honest. As I saw earlier, I try and find things where it's like, okay, doing this solves not just one problem, but like 8 problems all together and overlapping with one action. Makes sense? So that's a lot of what Enigma is about, and especially Enigma 2.0. It's like Enigma 2.0 is me taking every lesson I've ever learned in these years of Valheim and applying them to the beginning of the game itself, so that every experience is as different as possible based on the generation, so that the players have a lot more options of how they want to progress. One of the central things I want to have is the ability to maroon. So basically, you just go off in a random direction, crash in an island, and you can progress. You don't have to make sure you crash in the exact right situation so that you can access a pickaxe and then do whatever. Like, the idea is just you go anywhere and you can play Valheim. You know, you can have a swamp start, you can have a plain start, you can have a mistland start. They're going to be harder, but they're possible, right? And like that's the idea. Like I want to make it so that from the beginning, when you start Valheim, you have hundreds of different ways you can play, so that each time you play, you end up trying something different, right? Right now, the game kind of stops you from doing that. So I believe that if there's enough options for players that they have these experiences, then we get a couple streamers, like really popular streamers, maybe someday someone like Asmongold, to play one of these things. Boom, it's over. Like, then it's fine, because it's not like something like the adventure map is huge. It reached so many people, but ultimately it's still the same sort of problems that Valheim itself has as a game because it's very linear. Does that make sense? So there's this vacuum in the Valheim gameplay experience that's been created because of its linearity that you can't fill with a world that has to be played a certain way. That's why in Enigma Mode, it's designed so that you can play it on any world file, on any seed. You could take an adventure map from another game or another person, you know, and plop Enigma on it and try and run it. Like, the idea is to make it as flexible as possible so that it can bring out the best of Valheim, right? Like what currently happens in a lot of adventure maps is that you get the best of the Valheim building experience. You get a tour of these incredible builds and really beautiful things that Valheim has to offer. But when it comes to the core gameplay loop of Valheim, of building and getting resources and progressing, this is something very few experiences have actually touched. They tend to not deal with it, or they just keep it as, you know, you kill Ether, you've done the Ether stuff, you've done the first temple, now you go to the next one. That's what's most common in these other customized servers. So I'm hoping that because of how applicable Enigma is to any world, you know, you can make your favorite seed in Enigma mode, and you can still play your favorite seed. You don't need to download a certain map. I'm hoping that this will increase the replayability of the project overall by making it what people want from Valheim. And if I really play my cards right, obviously I need to get a bit more popular. I need to make more content that relates to more average Valheim players. But if I play my cards right, I can satisfy the need that people want from Iron Gate. And if I do it right, it will then encourage Iron Gate to do it themselves. Like, this is super long-term, multi-year thinking, so I could be completely wrong there, but I figured I'd just babble a bit about that. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to support my work, consider supporting me on Patreon. It's really, really helpful. The money I get from Patreon, I get around $100 a month, and that's really helped me not be as worried about things financially. I still need to earn another like $100 or $200 before I'm breaking even and my life's all right and everything's fine. So I need to get a little bit further. But through continuously doing this, through people supporting on Patreon, through the server ad revenue and YouTube ad revenue, I think I'll be able to do it. So just a reminder there, if you want to support the work, it's really helpful. Especially if you want to encourage me to keep doing game design, definitely really useful. But also you can just watch the videos, share them with your friends, like them on YouTube. That really helps. Subscribe to my channel. Check it out. Really, really appreciate it. And just another reminder, I stream twice a week, and you can ask me any questions during those streams. I also have tutorials coming out, 2 tutorials per week. So this has been my schedule, my new schedule. Let's see how long I'm able to deal with it. Because really, I have to make these tutorials to grow. So that's the really important thing. So if you see that I missed tutorials, call me out on it. Tell me, because it'll help me. That's really, I got to be making the tutorials. That's what makes the channel grow. The live streams help interact with those of you who already know about me. But live streams don't help me reach hundreds of new people. Whereas a tutorial that reaches thousands of people will help me reach hundreds of new people. So in order for this to work, I need to do both. I need to have a balance of development, live streaming, teaching people, making tutorials that are for normal Valheim things to get the foot in the door so that then those people start to learn this more advanced stuff. Because the reality is these things are just too far ahead of the typical Valheim player is like barely able to install Devcommands on a server. So like getting into all this stuff is like, it's just, people aren't ready for it yet, to be honest. I don't mean to like toot my own horn or other people's horns. I'm just saying that like Valheim's technically an early release. It's not out yet. Like 80 to 90% of the players don't use mods in the beginning. Like 40 to 50% of the players are actually like resentful or frustrated or hold some kind of emotions towards mods in general. So these are all like hurdles that have to be dealt with. I think time's going to fix all of it, but really what people need to see is they need to witness one of these experiences from a popular streamer. Once that happens, I think that's going to be the turning point for a lot of people. Until someone like Asmongold has one of these experiences and streams it, probably it's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's totally possible, but we need these like big figures to get the bull rolling to reactivate the Valheim players who no longer play, because Iron Gate themselves doesn't have a good grip on these players. I could be wrong, but like you can find interviews with Iron Gate staff members, and they have like views in the hundreds or maybe the thousands. Like that shows that the players don't really care about what they think. I don't mean to be offensive at all. I'm just saying, like, for a creator of a game as popular as Valheim, or anyone who works on the staff, to interview even on a small channel, and then those videos not get watched, it shows that they're not close. It makes sense. The players aren't close to Iron Gate. They're just not. Otherwise, when Iron Gate shows up in interviews, they would be watched. You know, they would get tens of thousands of views. So these are all problems. These are all things to deal with. But this is all super abstract, multi-year thinking. So don't worry about it. It's not really your issue. It's something I got to deal with. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you all